Hi, I'm Isha, and today I'm interviewing Dr. Jean Lauchin. Dr. Chin is a professor at the University of Philadelphia in the United States, and she's also a professor at the University of Sydney. She's a distinguished chair on a Fulbright Fellowship, and I'm so excited to hear about what you're doing.
Thank you. I'm a psychologist by background, and I'm here on my sabbatical, so that the work that I'm doing is really research on global and diverse leadership, and I'm here for 6 months.
That sounds really interesting, Jean, and I'd like to hear a bit about, what diversity means to you, and I guess what your approach to it is in the coming years for us.
Diversity to me really means looking at the differences across people and groups, and really an emphasis on looking at those differences within, whether we're talking about within an organization, within a country. And I use that as opposed to international or global, which is between countries and between those associations.
Okay. Then the focus of your work in diversity, I understand, is making leadership diverse, making leaders on boards and leaders in the community a diverse representation of the society we live in. So would you like to tell us a bit more about, what is the value of having diversity in leadership?
Okay, that's a really important and good question. When I first looked into leadership, because I have been in leadership roles as in management and other leadership roles. And then I went into looking at researching leadership. And when I first began to do that, I looked at many leadership models and ended up finding there weren't any that really looked at the issues of diversity in leadership, which is how I ended up then beginning to do research on diversity in leadership. And there's 2 points to that I wanted to make in response to your question. One is, it's not diversity, whether it's leadership or otherwise, is not just about representation. It's not how many of X numbers or types of people in particular groups that are around the table in the room or in so it's not only about representation, but also about what do you do that when you lead that reflects an attention to diversity, which is when someone leads and pays attention to the members of the group as if they're all the same and they're homogenous, and then often that they represent and reflect the dominant group in society, then that often ends up not being very culturally competent or diverse in one's leadership. So it's not only about who the leader is, although that's important, but also how the leader goes about engaging, interacting, and leading.
From there, Jean, it would be really important to ask the question that what actually makes an effective leader in today's world?
Okay. Yeah, and we need to look at some of the principles about cultural competence and about diversity, which includes the attention to and the value and respect for difference, the attention to and value for inclusiveness. So diversity, inclusiveness, respect for that. And with that then comes other qualities about integrity and being equity, and addressing those in how you formulate all aspects of your work, your influence and work as a leader. Because leadership is really about influence and achieving a shared outcome. And that to be effective means you have to pay attention to that in who your members are and how you go about doing your work and defining your outcomes. So that being effective then would include all those dimensions, and an effective leader which develops shared outcomes that reflects the diversity of the interest and goals of all their members.
To me, I feel huge pressure as the next generation of future leaders to carry forward this diversity. And I believe there's a really important role. I don't have an understanding of the role, but universities are really important in shaping leaders. So what's your take on the importance and role of universities in enabling us to become effective leaders?
I think it's really important, as when we talk about leadership, to really talk about leadership in our next generation. And because you are the future, and that's very critical in terms of attending to it, in terms of having you be prepared, for that, because you will be there certainly after, us. And the thing is that the role of universities in that process then becomes very critical, is that how do you teach and train your students and the younger generation towards preparing you for what you will need to do in the future. And I emphasize that because the emphasis on education has traditionally, in the 20th century, been more on developing skills. What are the skills that you will need? Given the changes now in society and how rapidly things are changing, that's no longer the case. You and the next generation, and I've said that before in other regards, that by the time you graduate, the world will be different from when it was when you were a student. And that's only a couple of years. So that any skill that you learn will be outdated by the time you graduate. So that's where the issue of the process and the role of leadership is one that is most important for universities to be thinking about and to prepare students to do and to engage. Now, I think at the University of Sydney, having come here, I have been both pleasantly surprised because of its unique, I believe, emphasis on looking at both leadership and cultural competence at the highest level of the university as goals and aspirations. And that is not that common throughout higher educations throughout the world, as I would understand. And therefore, it feels it's impressive, and I'm was pleasantly surprised to come here to see that, But at the same time, that's not enough, because just stating that to students, to faculty, and to everyone doesn't make it happen, doesn't make it meaningful, and doesn't make it relevant. So I think that's where it needs to come from both ends in terms of developing that as a mindset and as a goal, and to begin to look at the concrete ways as to how that can come about.
What sort of advice would you then give to the students of today, and what role do they play in driving forward leadership and diversity?
I think one of the things that I've talked about in terms of leadership is the importance of looking at our past, present, and future. That in one statement that's been made is you need to look at your past to see your future. And that has many implications, but in terms of students, you are our future. And I think to recognize that is important. So the message is one that what is to look at your responsibility and potential in emphasizing that, so that includes then the notions of how to be culturally competent, which is the self-awareness, the reflection, and the recognition of one's biases, but also what one brings, and how to use that in what you do in your career and your life. So I think that's one is, how do you keep that mindset about who you are and what you bring to the discussion in terms of your future. And the second message is prepare yourself with the, not with the skills as I mentioned, but with the process of what do I need to be as in terms of to be prepared to live, to lead, and to work in a future that's not going to be anything like what we are in right now.
You're studying global and diverse leadership, and what does that mean in terms of what you're doing in Australia?
Okay. Well, the work that I'm doing on global and diverse leadership is also part of an international leadership network that I actually formed together with the collaboration of more than 25 researchers throughout the globe. Here in Australia, what I'm doing is I want to look specifically at the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander leaders, because it is these voices that are actually missing from the dialogue in terms of leadership and leadership framework. We have lots and lots of data in the leadership literature about leadership, but they are primarily about white, male, North American, or Eurocentric leaders. And that's not a complete picture about who are the leaders and how is leadership exercised by a diverse group of leaders. So that I think these narratives will be quite informative in making a more complete picture about what's effective leadership and what can be effective leadership amongst diverse groups of leaders.